Some days people will blame leap years on computer glitches.
Absolutely. We've heard it happen, and it may happen again. So, I'm Warren Bell. I was part of the previous presentation. I'm a family physician here, and I've been involved with a number of advocacy initiatives in the community, but also, as a family physician, helped to found the Canadian Association of Physicians for the Environment. And I can assure you that we spent, as an organization, a lot of time thinking about how you grow food, and are front and center in support of two things that I think are relevant. One is what came out in our previous presentation, which is relocalizing the food supply. So instead of having some stuff coming in from Mexico or from New Zealand, not that there's anything wrong with the food they bring, it just comes a heck of a long way. And our local food system, which can support us when those transport links are broken, is left behind. Now, we have three people today, and we didn't know we'd have them all here, but we do, and we're very lucky to do so. We'll go with ladies first. Elmarie Roberts is a school teacher and a teacher in her blood, as she has told me. She was one of the guests on Food Conversations. She has degrees in teaching, but also later in her career developed an interest in growing things, and got a diploma from Gaia College in organic farming as a business. Now, what could be a more down-to-earth, practical way to learn about food? You learn about food without chemicals, and you learn about how to make it a functional business that works. So Elmarie will have some slides to show. We also have a young farmer, Mitch Ward, who's to my right here, your left, who has engaged in the farming process. He's born and raised in this area, and he is going to describe some of the challenges that he faced when he got into that particular field. And we also have from Notch Hill a brave man who, with his wife, came to this area to start up a community approach to farming. Ron and Jennifer St. Marie, Ron's a teacher and his wife is an occupational therapist. And yet, they were motivated through their own life experiences to get into the field of growing food, and they bought a large organic farm in the Notch Hill area, and you'll hear more about that from Ron. We're going to start off with Mitch telling us how he tried, how it worked, what led things off the rails a little bit, and about his ongoing commitment to farming. So, Mitch, nice to have you with. Please share your thoughts.
Thanks, Warren, and yeah, welcome everyone. So yeah, I was brought in to present sort of the challenge, and then I have two very wonderful co-presenters that are going to provide some solutions, and I'll do my best not to keep it too negative. But yeah, like Warren said, I grew up here, but I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in Tappan on a little piece of property, but didn't have much experience growing food. But kind of through high school and through spending some time in Vancouver, I decided I wanted to come back to the community. I decided I enjoyed growing, or wanted to try it at least. And so I started working at a farm called Wild Flight in Mara, and I worked there for about 5 seasons. At which point, a friend and me decided that we wanted to start our own little farm. So we leased some land on 30th, and we started growing cut flowers and vegetables. And we sold those at market. We did a CSA, and we also had a little farm stand. And so I'll kind of speak to a few of the key moments in that process, and where we had success, and where there were some challenges or some points that we could work on as a community. So around education, like I said, I was able to work on a farm for a little while, and I think that's a really great model. But I think one of the things that we can work on as a community is increasing those opportunities for young people, presenting ways that they could learn how to farm if they didn't grow up on their own family farm. And so I would love to see sort of a formal education option here in town, where the college offered, a 2-year, 3-year degree in learning how to grow, so that people could stay in the community, they could learn in the community, they could become connected to the farming community here and then continue to grow. And so, yeah, I think that is a really important aspect of people getting into farm. And the second thing is land access. So Salmon Arm is in a little bit of a unique position in that we have a lot of agricultural land within city limits, and I think there's huge potential there. We have, people that want to grow, and we have the land. And so I think in our case, we were able to find a lease very quickly. We were able to find a lease that wasn't very expensive. But it did mean that we had to start from scratch. And so at that lease, we had to build the infrastructure. We had to build refrigeration. We had to build an irrigation system. We had to build storage. We had to, really invest a lot of time and money in order to get that started. And so I'll come to it later, but around financial sustainability, that sets people that are wanting to get into growing food commercially up in a way that makes them a little bit more vulnerable going forward. And so, that lease option is great, and I think there's some things that I'll talk about later that we could do that will help young people or new farmers be able to access that land a little bit easier. But that lease option is great, and in our case, there's a scenario where if a person owns agricultural land in the community and then they lease it out and they can gain farm status, they gain a discount in property taxes, and the farmer gains an ability to grow food. So it really is a win-win, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who's interested in setting something like that up. But the other aspect that was a bit of a challenge for us was around water. So when you find that lease and you find that land and you get your infrastructure built and you get started, there's a few different options. You could either have water rights on a waterway, like a creek or a river. You could have a well, or you could have municipal water. And in our case, we were really close to town. It was great marketability, good soil and everything, but our setback was that we only had municipal water. There was no other infrastructure. And at that time, it was a little bit of a gray area around what that water could be used for, how often it could be used, and where we stood as a farm in the community. And so, that was a real limitation, and we kind of found that out as we went along. And the city has since implicated or created bylaw that specifically says no commercial farming can be done on a piece that's greater than half an acre, and municipal water cannot be used if it is beyond half an acre, and if it is being used on a half-acre commercial farm in town, it has to be metered. So you'd have to convince your landlord to meter the water, and then obviously pay the money, which I think most people could adapt to, but convincing a landlord to do that is a challenge. So that's one barrier that I'm sure my co-presenters can talk about. But as a community, I think, like Warren and his co-presenter said in the last presentation, I think recognizing those nuances is really important when we're building policy. So being able to say food production is not the same as lawn irrigation, right? And so being able to build a policy specifically for agricultural production in the community that supports that and helps it flourish. And I think if you look at any other community, for example, Victoria or Vancouver or Delta, even places closer to home here, they've created specific packages for people who are interested in farming in the city limits, and I think Salmon Arm would do well by producing something like that as well. And finally, I think like the financial sustainability of farming is an important thing to talk about. I don't think anyone is getting into it hoping to get rich. Our goal with starting the farm was to earn at least as much money as we had been earning working for someone else. And we did that. I think that is a great testament to the strength of the community here in Salmon Arm and the strength of the farming community in allowing us to sell, supporting us with equipment and mentorship when we needed it. But at the end of the day, like I said, because we invested so much, because we're starting kind of with a step backwards, it was a bit of a challenge, especially because farming is a seasonal position. So you work from March until November, and it's a tough go already. So anything that we can do as a community to kind of to support these farmers throughout the year, I think is going to be beneficial. And for example, things like the farmers market downtown or Zest Commercial Kitchen, those are great examples of ways that the community is stepping up and sort of finding ways to hold up food production in the community and to make it more financially attainable for these people. But yeah, I'll pass the mic to Warren here.
Thank you, Mitch. That's an on-the-land experience, not a theoretical experience. Now, the other two presenters today have a long background in teaching. And we were having a little bit of a discussion before we began that Mitch would outline a problem and we'd try and see if we could, my co-presenters could address some of the issues that he's found challenging. And I think that's a wonderful way to structure a panel, that we're all trying to make something happen that's constructive. Our next speaker is Elmarie Roberts, who has some slides to show, and you will see her background in the world of teaching and education is really a very strong part of her story. And we're going to switch chairs so she can have greater access to, I am pleased to say, a somewhat faster laptop than we had before.
Thank you, Warren, and everyone. I just want to say I'm not a speaker, so this is going to be very short and sweet, and it's going to be a story. I love stories, and I'm simply going to tell you a story of what happened. It was magical, and it's a true story. It's the story of Haliburton Farm. Can you all hear me? Haliburton Farm in Victoria, BC. So there's a wonderful group in Victoria called the Capital Regional Food and Agriculture Initiatives Roundtable, or CR FAIR, and they introduced the concept of incubator farms. And there in this picture at the top, that's me in the red sweater. I was the first one on this incubator farm in the middle of Cordova Bay. The reason why I was there is because there's a wetland, and the wetland was up for development. It's agricultural land reserve, and everybody around there, especially the neighbors, started paying attention. They wanted this wetland to stay. And the mayor, we all put on our suits, went to the mayor, and asked him if he wouldn't rather grow food there. And thank heavens, he showed a lot of vision way back then. And he said, sure, but you have to show me you can grow food. Well, I had no background in growing food. And there was one farmer. It started with two really good farmers. And long story short, next happened, it was 2002. It was divided into 8 businesses. And there were 12 farmers. They each had about 4 interns or students with them each year. Each farm had a decent income. It was divided into 1 acre each. And it was metered and had drip irrigation. A lot of hugel beds or regenerative agriculture methods was starting to be used there because water was so expensive. And as we all know, if you start a hugel bed, German for hill, it conserves water, and you don't need as much water. It was close to a school, so there were a lot of educational placements, not just from the colleges in Victoria, but also from the schools, children who didn't want to be at school, but they wanted to do something meaningful and volunteer. So they came there, and I can tell you now, I've seen so many transitions in people progressing from mental health, from people on the streets in Victoria who didn't have a job. It addressed all of those. All our basic needs, fun, food, belonging, what's the other one? Love. And there was solid infrastructure. We had to build it, unfortunately. So I'm gonna, you know what, I've moved here only about 2 years now. And it sparkles around here. So I'm just gonna give you sparkles so you can walk away with sparkles. I'm blown away by the rocks here and the sparkles. So that's the land, okay? So it's municipal land. The municipality bought it from the CR Capital Regional District for $600,000. And then it was the infrastructure and the rezoning, rural demonstration farm, so you had to show that you could farm. BC transit accessible, limited passing, wetlands, schools, neighbors. So they gave us $5,000, the municipality gave us $5,000, mentioned that we had to start a non-profit society. They didn't want to have anything to do with it, no problems. We had to keep the neighbors happy, it shouldn't smell or anything, seeing that it was going to be certified organic. They were concerned about smells. Reassured them, no worries. And then we had to pay our own utilities, repair and maintain an education center or old house that was on the property and belonged to the municipality. So that's the infrastructure. We had a packaging area, an office area, washroom, kitchen, cooler, education and event center, which was in this house. We had 18 greenhouses that the farmers built themselves, and they could take it with them. They each had a memorandum of understanding of 4 years, to be renewed for another 4 years for a maximum of 10. No permanent structures. There was a cooler. With the help of Wonderful Angels Rotary, we built a cooler and fencing around the property and irrigation in place for all the farmers. These were the little farms. They all had their own names. Isn't it wonderful? Give your children a piece of backyard and tell them to give their farm their own name. You'll be amazed to see what they come up with. There was North Star Organics. This fellow, after 6 years, went on to farm in Central Saanich. As a farmer in Central Saanich, because they've now built up these relationships, he offered him a parcel of his land at a very good price and blueberries. North Star Organics today is a thriving business in the middle of Central Saanich, thanks to a good farmer who now doesn't have to be worried anymore about his land being farmed. And what's more, the CRD, with their land access program that they've just started this week, are now looking for a land manager. Anybody who wants to go to Victoria to be a land manager of Bear Hill Farm. This is now a duplication of Haliburton Farm at the foot of Bear Hill in Victoria, BC. The Capital Regional District followed through with a talk of land access for farmers. They've had it going for years. And with pushing, advocating from people like the CR Fair and many others, they are now actually doing it. And they have examples to follow. Unit 3 became, that was Little Mountain Farm. It was just a wonderful farm. New Mountain Farm, sorry. Unit 3 was, what did he call it? Barefoot Organics. He loved to walk barefoot, so he called his farm Barefoot Organics, and he loved the wine by that name. And Littlest Acre, she's just an amazing woman on her own, farming 1 acre, all making a decent living. Mine was called Sunbird Farm, named after a hummingbird in Africa. They call hummingbird sunbird, and I grew flowers, and there were lots of those there. Saanich Native Plants, now called Satin Flower Nurseries, is a fantastic, thriving business who have moved on from the farm. They now have their own business in Mitchosen. And they have a storefront still at Haliburton, where people can drive up and see all the native plants on display there, and then go to the bigger farm in Mitchosen, buy it there. Municipalities have signed contracts with them. And then the little farmhouse was right there. These are the farmers. That's us, babies, everybody. So happy, a big family. That's me, long ago. Each one had a memorandum of understanding. Samples are available. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. There was an application policy for everybody, a request for proposals process. So it was a blend of experience, and there was a lot of peer support. Memorandum of agreement, that was an example of my farm, the layout, lots of biodiversity and volunteers. The structure, so 12 members on the board, 2 farmers on the board, biodiversity member on the board. We learned that some members on the board have limited time. We needed a strong board, and we needed squeaky clean bookkeeping for the municipality. Counting's important, legal, insurance, annual reports, maintenance records, and memory. Keep that organizational memory so you can share it. So there were issues. How do we resolve it? We have weekly farmer meetings. For example, the biggest one, can we live on the site? For that particular area, it didn't work, unfortunately, because of the municipality wanting the house to be the education center. We had strong policies, procedures, as I mentioned, and tried our best to get housing for folks as close as possible to the farm. Policies, yep, I mentioned that. There was a dog policy because neighbor's dog killed someone's duck one day. That was a big marketing and selling. We were one of the first farmers to start at Moss Street Market. Please visit it today when you go to Victoria. We shared the costs of the farms land at Moss Street, and it was very lucrative. I could remember people coming home on Saturdays in tomato season with $4,000 on a Saturday, and this was way back. And there's nothing more satisfying than holding that cash in your hand and counting it. And then we also participated in the other markets available in Victoria. Wholesale deliveries twice a week to the restaurants, they just bought into it. And a delivery person gets commission. We had our own delivery person. And the food box, beautiful food box, the neighbors came, picked it up, CSA. Farm stand, right there on the premises. And a website, online payments, Facebook. Fundraising, we had a stand at the annual Ironman next to Elk Lake there, just to give an example. There were many fundraising. The biggest one was when we started the Saanich CD Saturday. And that's something, by the way, that Salmon Arm could do with is a CD Saturday, and I'm willing to help with that. I started the Saanich CD Saturday. And then I'm just saying this because I never knew I could do these things, and I got energy from somewhere. I get quite emotional about it, and it worked. So I'm sharing a story that worked. Grants, farm tours, those are all income. Look at all the tours there. Marketing, we had our own press releases. We had avenues for selling our products. The best one was online sales. We started a farm school. This was the social enterprise. And fulfill the education vision, you have to have a strong vision. And then the farm school then morphed into Gaia College teaching on farm. And there's nothing like hands-on teaching for visual learners. Most of us are visual learners, so doing it, learning by doing. Community engagement, lots of work parties, all ages. The farmers ranged from 19 to 76 was our oldest farmer. Our neighbors, the wetland. So it's a permaculture hotspot for biodiversity as well. They found endangered round-nosed salamanders there, and it was certified organic. That was difficult, but we used it as an education opportunity to teach people how to farm certified organically. So I would say the land, get knowledgeable farmers, get a committed board of directors, community. People want to help, they just don't know how to. And then have clear policies. So we have to provide the opportunity for our young farmers. It's a different world we live in now. And if you can support a young person today, do it. There were challenges, where to go to after that. So we really made strong connections with our landowners. And because they've come to know these farmers, they trusted them. They offered them land. They knew that their land would be in good position. So, so there are challenges. but collaboration is the bottom line. Thanks, everyone, and I'm interested to hear so that's the incubator farm model. There are many examples. After that, one in Duncan, one in Port Alberni, McVeigh, you can just look where they are all over Canada now and the United States. The United States in Vermont. Lovely examples to follow.
Thank you very much, Elmarie. That's quite a story, and a story that Mitch was sitting beside you listening to. And before we go to Ron, who's got a whole different perspective, but a lot of shared points that with Elmarie, Mitch, as you were listening to Elmarie speak, were you thinking, "God, I wish I'd had that available to me. If only this had been in our community." Why don't you just take 5 minutes to share what you thought would have helped?
Sure, yeah. No, I think an incubator farm would be an excellent addition to the farming community in Salmon Arm. I'm still very, very passionate about farming. Unfortunately, we had to close the farm, but at the next opportunity, I'm excited to get into it. And I know I'm not the only one. There's a very active group called Young Agrarians that operates throughout the province, and across Canada, really. But they, spending any time at their events, you can see there's this huge desire to grow food. There's a recognition of the importance of that among not just young people, but a huge portion of the community. And so I think something like an incubator farm would do a really good job of just breaking down some of those barriers that make getting into growing food difficult. Because at the end of the day, it's a tough thing to make a really good business case for. I think we're talking about something that the benefits go far beyond financial. We, like Warren spoke about in his last presentation, the importance of local food is only going to get more important. We can see just in the last few years that grocery store prices are coming on par with farmers market prices, and I think that's a really good illustration of things to come. And so the stronger food system we can create here now is gonna help us into the future. So I really do think that what Elmarie spoke of would be an excellent initiative here in Salmon Arm, and obviously that will require getting the ear of the city, or if we wanted to do it independently. I think the appetite is there, and it's a great next step.
Thank you, Mitch. We're now going to hear from Ron St. Marie, who, as I said earlier, with his wife, bought a large organic farm in the Notch Hill area. They bought it, however, not as their first rodeo, but as a culmination of a long history for both of them of exploring different ways to do things around the world, in Europe, in Asia, other parts of North America, and South and Central America. So you're going to hear a kind of a value-laden presentation from Ron St. Marie.
That's reasonable to say it's a value-laden. Yeah. We, Jennifer and I, are the happy stewards. I hesitate to talk about ownership somehow. I really feel like it's a stewardship thing. We are stewards of Notch Hill Community Growers. Now, it does say Notch Hill Farm. This shirt was designed for us by our daughter-in-law in Korea, and she put it together with love and care, and we are called Notch Hill Community Growers. And before I go on to our story, one of the couple things that Elmarie said twigged a memory for me, especially about a video that I'd seen. She talked a lot about, urban farming and community building together. I saw a stunningly inspiring video about an urban farm in San Francisco. This farm hired only ex-cons, and they had a thriving farm. They produced not so much annual vegetables, but they produced perennials for shipping out all across the country. Anyway, they hired only people who had been freed from prison after doing their time. And these people had an almost zero criminal repeat rate, recidivism rate. So having your hands on the ground, working with other people, creating something that is of real value, I'm willing to guess that very few, if any of those people, had that kind of experience before they landed in the clink. So that made me think of that. So we are Notch Hill Community Growers. That's a very aspirational name because we do not have a whole lot of community on our farm as of yet. But we've been there for 3 years, and when we came in, we had a certain set of goals. Among them, do you remember like I do? Well, when I was younger, we would go for a ride in the car in the country, and within half an hour, you had to stop and scrape the bugs off your windscreen. Anybody old enough to remember that kind of phenomenon? I grew up in the prairies. That's the way it was. Do you have to do that today? We have lost enormous amounts of biodiversity and just numbers of creatures, evidenced by those bugs that are no longer on your windscreen. So when we came to the farm, we wanted to increase biodiversity, contribute to local food security. We wanted to farm regeneratively, which in the question time afterward, if you want to ask about what that means, I can go into it. And we wanted to create community. And as we've been there for 3 years, am I speaking too loudly or anything, by the way? No? Okay. As we've been there for the 3 years, we realized that that creation of community is absolutely essential to the success of all the other things we'd like to do. Because together, Jennifer and I, admittedly, with the help of some people who we hire from time to time, weekly, say, and some friends who still come out from Kamloops to volunteer. We moved from Kamloops. We still have a couple friends who keep coming out there to help with projects. In spite of the fact that we have those helpers, there is no possible way that we can realize the potential of those 126 acres, just the two of us, with a couple of helpers. So we are convinced that community and co-farming and co-housing is the way to go. Why? Young guys wanting to farm have a heck of a time being able to afford to do it. Money is a pinch, right? Owning land is very, very difficult for young people. The Haliburton experience, sorry brother, swing you in the head. The Haliburton experience is a great way to help people get going. But still you need community in order to thrive. In the day before industrial farming, and I'm not going to slag industrial farming a whole lot here, but in the days before that, you had communities working together. You had 6 or 7 children, you had extended families on the farm. And we see a place for that. We see a place for creating community, in part because, well, look at those people who were on that farm in San Francisco. Had they had that kind of community, would they have gotten into the problems they had in the first place? We have pandemics of things like loneliness and drug abuse and all kinds of effects of being separated from one another. And so we're convinced that co-farming and co-housing are important ways to go. Now, in order for this this complicates life, mind you. When you're going to be working with people, it complicates life. It doesn't just add. This is just enormously more difficult, from what I can tell. However, the rewards are enormous. I've lived and worked on a kibbutz in Israel, which is a collective farm. Jennifer and I lived in a co-housing project in the Lower Mainland, which had some elements of pulling together, absolutely. We lived in a co-housing project briefly in Kamloops while we transitioned into our home. And we have determined, between us, we think it's absolutely essential that you have to have a clearly articulated shared vision and values together. If you don't develop these things, a shared vision and a shared values, your community will not survive. And I'd like to give you an example of the kinds of things I'm talking about. Sometimes these elements that I'm going to mention are spoken of as forms of wealth. Typically in our society, we think of wealth as dollars or things owned. But let me put a different spin on wealth, and we talk about value and vision. Of course, we have financial wealth. We can work toward that. And as we wrote our one-page value and vision statement, we wrote it aspirationally, what we want to achieve on our land together. Another aspect of the wealth that we want to create is material. What is the material wealth that we would have? And that's living wealth. That's the kinds of tools and all that kind of stuff that we have. That's another kind of wealth. That segues into the animals and plants. That's another kind of wealth that anybody can be part of. Well, you don't have to live on a farm. Social wealth, your connections with other people. It's a way to count wealth that is not based just on dollars and cents. When you start to add up these other types of wealth, you start to think, you start to realize that you have perhaps more going for you than just the financial aspect. Experiential wealth, the kind of things you bring to your community, the kinds of experiences you bring to the farm, to your life together. Cultural wealth. What do you enjoy culturally? What do you bring? What does that bring to your life in all? It's a kind of wealth as well. Intellectual wealth, spiritual wealth, all kinds of possibilities where if you look more broadly to determine what you have instead of just your black or red bottom line, you can look at wealth in a more holistic, comprehensive way. Now, the more people you have together to help create that kind of wealth, the more things can roll. We have thought of life together as in two aspects. One of them would be farming co-op. And it seems to me that the Haliburton, though it was not perhaps designed as a co-op, seemed to function that way. Is that fair to say? Would you like to comment on that at all? Do you have anything to say about that?
A lot of overlap, and I must say people using the Haliburton farm model then went on to start co-ops. Yeah.
I would also add that working together with other people may have a formal structure, but it is ultimately people working together. And as Mitch has described, you didn't have access to that kind of structure like an incubator system. But as you also said, people were very kind. You got help from other people in the community, and your landlord was very flexible about some of the arrangements you made with them. And that principle, the principle of working together as opposed to trying to solve issues alone, I think is embodied in what you presented, Elmarie, and it's definitely embodied in what you're talking about.
Yeah. So farm co-op, we've all heard of that kind of a thing. I'm going to stand up to illustrate to you two reasons why co-op would be excellent on my farm. Exhibit A, my knees. Kneeling down is hard work. Exhibit B, my back. Exhibit C, perhaps the sense of unity and cooperation I would feel at the end of the day if there were more people working together, pulling together. It kind of, I taught school for 30 years. I came away with a bit of a pension that helps support our farm habit, if I could put it that way. It helps support it, but Exhibit A and Exhibit B tell me that it's only sustainable for so long. Your average person who has stronger knees and a stronger back doesn't have the financial wherewithal. And it's been mentioned how expensive farmland is, whether you purchase or whether you lease or whatever. There are so many people around, I know, young people who would really love to be part of something. And it's part of the way, the vision that we have of moving forward. multi-generational, multi-family, living on the land. Now I've segued into housing co-op. I've segued into cooperative housing, and I'd like to draw a distinction between that and the kind of co-op we lived in White Rock 35 years ago. Back in the day, the federal and provincial governments put a lot more money into affordable housing, and they made things like co-ops, and they allowed for people to pay full freight rent and other people to pay less than full freight rent if they couldn't afford it at all. And so it all averaged out. It made it work. The problem with that, or the difference of that and what we were hoping to create, is that people come to a housing co-op typically for their own financial well-being, and that's a perfectly legitimate reason. But what we're looking for is something that's more intentional by nature. People who want to come together to live and work and share their lives. One of the things we did, I mean, and on all of these I could go into more detail, but time is important here as well. One of the things that Jennifer and I did to explore these ideas is we traveled to Scandinavia, where co-housing, intentional living in co-housing, is far more common than it is here. They have a more collective vision of life there, less individualized. And these kind of communities are really important in those countries. And the government, through zoning and other kinds of laws, makes it easy to create co-housing, as opposed to ours, where it can be very, very difficult, especially on agricultural land. And that's another thing. But when we went to Scandinavia to talk to people about what works in co-housing and what doesn't, some interesting things came up. I won't go through many of them. One of them was how your buildings are designed. Are your buildings designed to bring people together, or are your buildings designed such that they keep people apart? Are there common ways that you have to move through the day, through the buildings, that bring you together? For example, common laundry facilities where people would be meeting one another. And I'm going to ask you a question, see what you think of this might be the answer to this. Over and over again, we were told the single most important daily activity that must be done in order to create co-housing cohesion, social cohesion. What do you think that one activity is? Eat together. It is absolutely to eat together. We know instinctively, when I put the question that way, you knew instinctively what I was fishing for, didn't you? Because if you're eating together, you're communing, you're sharing some of the most important things that you do. So that's a vision of what we have for our farm, and it's a vision that I think is workable, is doable. We've seen it elsewhere. It's not as common in this part of the world, but it is doable, I'm convinced. So the more you eat together, maybe the more you do laundry together, the more you grow food together, the more cohesion you'll have. The vision that we have is of a community where we might have 4 or 5 households living on the land, where at least one adult from each household is committed to farming, and another one might be working in town to bring in some extra bread. I mean, I do that too. We sat down a little while ago, we calculated, Ron, how many days of teaching do you have to do in the next year? I teach on call. How many days of teaching do you have to do in the next year to be able to afford enough farm help to keep us alive? And we figured it out. It's not outrageous. But that's one of the flexible things that you could do if you had family units living together. So you could have multiple generations. How are we doing for time? I have one more thing I want to hit on. Can I hit on one more thing? Are you getting tired of my style? If I sang the next part, would that be okay with you? Should I sing the next section of my presentation? No, I won't. I won't. I won't. If you're going to work together, you have to find a way to make decisions together, to organize your life, and to work efficiently and harmoniously together in what you do. I'm not just talking about the land, I'm talking about the kinds of things you'd have to do, meetings of groupings and that kind of thing. So I'm going to launch into that for a couple of minutes, because if anybody here is curious about this kind of aspect of life together, that could make farming a more cooperative, communitarian, wholesome, and enjoyable experience than being on your own. Question. Have you ever been to a meeting or a series of meetings where somebody dominates and other people can't seem to get in a word edgewise? It happens, doesn't it? Have you ever been in a meeting or a series of meetings where you attempt to use consensus decision making but are roadblocked by the difficulty of achieving some kind of unanimous agreement on a topic? Have you ever been part of a group that took a decision and later on you started to see, well, maybe we could have done something better, but you don't know how to bring it up because you think you might be stepping on someone else's toes or offending somebody else who had the idea in the first place. And these kind of things all can happen. And they happen all the time under certain types of organizations. So I would like to put in a word for something called sociocracy. Now this might seem like it's way off, but it is a wonderful way to work together. Now sociocracy was developed, well, it goes back some time, but in its modern incarnation was developed by a Dutch industrialist who wanted his company to work together more harmoniously. And so he started studying this kind of thing and came up with what is called modern sociocracy and is taught in a number of places. Jennifer and I took a course on it, and if we ever had enough people to create community, we would hope that this would be the kind of decision-making model that would be followed. So, in a nutshell, what happens? I'll be brief. There's a lot of organizational, structural things, but in a nutshell, when you bring a proposal to a group, and there are specific ways of making proposals that are healthy and strong and viable. When you bring a proposal to a group, it's opened up for the whole group, the whole circle to deal with. In that meeting, it is structured so that every single person gets the chance to say their word as much as they want. Nobody is shut down. And every proposal that is accepted comes not only with what to do, but a timeline and a set of criteria to judge whether or not that proposal is actually working. So suppose you want to, in your community, build a children's playground. You bring the proposal, it's discussed, it's gone around in circles, it's improved as it goes, and then it's adopted. And when it's adopted, a timeline for reassessment and criteria for reassessment are included in the proposal. So nobody ever has to go out of their way to question whether it was originally a good idea. Because everybody involved will be questioning whether it was a good idea and whether it was well thought through and well executed. Anyway, we see cooperative living and cooperative farming as solutions to a number of the problems that exist. Young people don't have enough money, old people don't have strong enough backs. There's much more to do than two people can handle, and a lot more than just two people want to get into farming and doing things in a regenerative kind of way. I think I'll stop here. You might get the impression I could go on longer. You'd be correct. But here we go.
Internal self-limitation, a wonderful thing. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ronan. And thank you to the other panelists here today. We have a few more minutes, and if any of you would like to offer some feedback or comments or maybe relate an experience that you felt was touched on by one of our panelists today, then here's your golden opportunity. Either that or you're hungry, physically hungry.
I think Elmarie should collaborate with someone and make a little animation about her story. Because
Yes.
I would have liked to have seen more photos and see it on the ground. It was really.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem that the screen is backlit.
I'm thinking long term,
there's
not
too
right
much
now.
light coming.
Not right now.
But other than that,
It was
yeah.
a beautiful little story.
Well, I think what you've heard are stories, 3 different stories. One of somebody who plunged straight into farming, driven by passion and enthusiasm, and 5 years of direct experience on someone else's farm. Elmarie, who joined into something that became a passion after many years of teaching in other settings, and became inspired beyond anything that had happened before. And now, I might add, is a consultant for the teaching garden for the Shuswap Food Action Society on a regular basis, along with Sue Moore. And then here's somebody who has been all over the world looking to find structures and ways of doing things that bring the people doing them together in constructive ways. As you were speaking, Ron, I couldn't help but think about the early experience of European settlers coming to the eastern seaboard of this continent and finding that indigenous communities would have a group meeting of the entire community every day. That was because the settlers that were coming from Europe were a bit of a problem. They had to figure out how to deal with them. And that took a lot of time and energy. It shocked and amazed the Europeans, because many of them were parts of military organizations, which were very structured and very hierarchical. Indigenous communities, if you were the chief, your chiefdom was only as good as your last speech. And if you couldn't either accept a consensus that differed from your presentation, then you were sort of sidelined and people went their own way. Something that we find almost impossible to imagine in our sort of tightly structured society. So I think you've learned 3 different perspectives. It's all about learning, it's all about collaboration, and it's all about people being involved collectively and individually, but most strongly collectively. So I would like to thank Ron and Elmarie and Mitch for being such eloquent contributors to this discussion. And if any of you want to ask them questions afterwards, I'm sure they'll hang around for a little bit, and you can bend their ear or ask them what you'd like to learn from them. And thank you very much, all of you, for attending this somewhat traffic-laden setting, but you've done very well to maintain your focus and concentration on what was going on up here, and we thank you for that. Thank you.